Welcome to the August 2021 edition of Readings at Home. Today, I will be bringing you 4 writers with a Malaysian connection. Hope you enjoy it. Our first reader for today is Joe Cookathis. Joe is an actor, writer, and director, and the artistic director of the Instant Cafe Theatre Company. She'll be reading an extract from her story, The Morning After, which she wrote in April 2013, a few weeks before General Election number 13. Later that year, she turned the story into a play. It's the story of a weak, corrupt, despotic ruler who wakes up one morning to find himself deposed from power. He isn't happy. His wife has abandoned him. So has his entourage, and he is quite alone, or is he? Joe says about it, "It was more than wishful thinking. I desperately wanted Najib to be deposed. I needed to imagine that day. With all the recent despotic behavior, this short story comes back to me." Thank you, Joe.
The Morning After. A massive, ornately carved bed dominates the room. Behind the bed, huge curtains fall from the ceiling. Downstage right is a chair. A tassel bell pull hangs nearby. It should suggest a noose as well. Downstage left is a writing table and chair. A mirror is stage right. 1 or maybe 2 large windows are stage left. Hanging on the wall on the right, but obscured for now, is a massive portrait. At the back, stage left, almost hidden, is a mysterious cupboard. Inside the cupboard is a bottle. Inside the bottle is a polong. However, the general sense is of Baroque, fallen grandeur. There are broken walls, peeling paint and wallpaper, dust, plaster everywhere. There are also trays of half-eaten food, the sense of rats and decay. You wake up feeling bitter, angry. Where was it written it would come to this? The Egyptian cotton sheets chafe your neck. Your silk pajamas with a teddy bear logo are dank with sweat. You tug the tassel bell which summons bed tea, toast, and bitter orange marmalade. You were born to this. And now what? Comets, popes deposing themselves, natives uprising. Your driver tells you not to worry. He's a good man, loyal. But you could have sworn he was scanning the classifieds when he came out of the men's room at the Hotel Imperial a few days ago. Your wife had taken you there to cheer you up, just you, the press, and a small entourage of 40. Was it your imagination, or has your entourage shrunk? The food was delicious, 2 Michelin stars, but it tasted like mud and ash, like sackcloth and ashes. How to go back to Ikan Kembong when you have feasted on caviar? When you have eaten sushi off the bodies of translucent girls? How to go back? There are toast crumbs inside your sheets. You remember that restaurant in Switzerland where a white-gloved attendant whisked away all telltale crumbs with a gold-handled whisk. You admired his precise, brisk movements, his impassive Swiss face, and his golden whisk. It really was a very pretty whisk, with stiff, springy bristles and a smooth, golden grip. It made a satisfying, scraping sound on the white tablecloth. You had admired it throughout the evening, quite loudly and insistently, and had been ever so pleased when your host had presented it to you. What has happened to it, you wonder? You need it. You think wistfully of your whisk. Outside you hear the rumble of trucks. Already you miss the sound of servants, the swish of polyester, their dull, comforting murmur, the gentle butterfly sound of 100 eyes being cast down. On that dreadful day after the polls, one of them had looked you directly in the eye, and you felt frightened. Your heart went thump the way they did in the Enid Blyton books of your London childhood in Knightsbridge. Wistfully, you remember Alaria and the way she used to be. Alaria who brought you profiteroles resting plump and moist on bone china plates. Alaria who ate chocolate-covered strawberries and sucked her fingers clean, who ate baguettes in bed and left crumbs everywhere. You yearn for her and those nights at the Hotel Maurice in Paris where your bodyguards drank the bar and barmaids dry. The trail of breadcrumbs has made you melancholy. Hansel and Gretel had laid a trail of crumbs to get themselves out of the dark wood, but you don't like breadcrumbs. You like the dark woods at the edge of your kingdom. They are secretive and sinister, and trails can so easily go cold or dead in there. Who would have imagined anyone would find breadcrumbs in a wood, or that the breadcrumbs would wind their way through forests and highways and concessions and tenders to your bedroom? You had been so careful to whisk the trail clean. Your people are so clumsy, you moan into your pillow. They have no finesse. The Swiss have had centuries to refine their craft and their craftiness. Your people are lumpen proletariat. You feel a sudden nostalgia for your childhood. You remember the wide river, its muddy mouth. There is great richness in filth, said your great-grandfather. Your ancestry was estuarine, always in retreat. The mercantile ebb and flow of boats, the spasmodic skirmishers with crocodiles. The crocodiles watch you coldly from riverbanks for signs of weakness or hesitation. Not for your ancestor, the terror of the open seas or combat in frightful swells of lurching water. They like to feel the mud under their feet and the tall, sharp grass slice their arms and back. They respected the crocodiles and the marshes of silt. As an infant, you had enjoyed poking out treasures from the mucky banks of the river, enjoyed the strange stews of the local people. What a shame the new imam who came preached against the delicious karang and crab of your childhood. But times they were changing and you had to go with the flow. There was no other way. Besides, you don't like mud. And you prefer your crocodiles disemboweled, flayed and polished into an elegant pair of evening shoes. Eliminating the competition had always made more sense to you than living with it. How were you to know there were crocodiles within your own ranks, sunning themselves in your banks, waiting to roll in your tanks, waiting for the chips to be down? You had been skiing with them in the Tyrol, sailed the seas on their yachts, eaten fried bananas at their open house. You hate fried bananas. The light shifts across the bedclothes and you think of the cool, dark jungles of your adolescence. Home for the holidays, you wandered alone through their giant canopies, a pop gun slung across your back, and pistols which fired real caps in your pocket. Of course, you never used them in the jungle. You knew better than to wake up the sleeping jinns and orang bunyan, or even worse, the terrifying abandoned polong. But you felt better, having the gun close to your body as you crept softly through the dense foliage. Respect the jungle, your grandfather had always said. Ask permission, even when you pee. But English boarding schools had made you soft, and Harrow had made you forgetful. The urge to go had overcome your grandfather's warnings. You had barely zipped up your shorts when the jungle turned on you. Leaves slapped your face, mosquitoes zipped in your ear, armies of leeches crept in waves up your calves and plump thighs towards your dark, moist groin. You stumbled and thrashed your way through streams and creepers while the murderous imps of your grandfather's stories, the toil, the Pelissa and Apollon, clutched at your chest, your legs, your hair. You tore at your clothes, pulling at the horrors, sucking at your groin, while imps ran in mad, endless circles in your head till you fell, frothing, writhing and vomiting onto the jungle floor. Your servants, following at a discreet distance, ran at you with salt and cries of distress, but it was just rubbing salt into the wound. They carried you to a clearing. You sat on a rock, humiliated, your shorts around your ankles as they ministered to you tenderly. You imagine your grandfather's contempt. High above the sun, the hawk circled. Perhaps that is why you now enjoy watching the giant bulldozers destroy the jungle, strip the trees, send leaves and branches splintering and exploding like so much confetti. Your hard hat shines in the sun as you place your foot on a dead serdang. It had been backed over by a soil truck. You puff out your chest and feel like a conquistador. The egrets cry out and soar across rivers boiling with sticks and mud and foam. You love nature. Once, eating sushi in Uruguay, you wondered if the wooden chopsticks you held in your own hands came from your own dark jungle. This was once a mighty tree, you think profoundly. You were there to discuss the sovereign debt crisis, Italy, Greece, and all that, but you dip your head and allow yourself this brief moment of melancholy. You sit up. You feel humbled and statesmanlike. You reach for a sliver of unagi. Humility always makes you ravenous, but your wife raps your knuckles. You're getting fat. The bankers at the table are startled. You make a feeble joke. The crocodiles around the table watch inscrutably. It must be noon. It's hot. The sunlight glints harshly across your quilted duvet, but it's too much effort to get out of bed and draw the curtains. You pull the covers over your head instead, the better to feel sorry for yourself, but you can't breathe. Outside you can see blue skies, white puffs of clouds, and the familiar spires, minarets and domes of your once upon a kingdom. You know you should go down and pray, bow and prostrate yourself, but it's been a trying few days and you haven't slept well. The paper shredders have been hard at work. You got up once in the middle of the night. Across the artificial lake, you saw the lights blazing, heard the shredders gasp and shudder. The sunlight is unbearable. The moment they took your Jaguar away was the worst. You had tried to throw a tantrum, but tantrums don't work anymore. Instead, you stomped off moodily to throw boiled peanuts at the hippos at the bottom of the garden. They opened their maws wide and waited for the delicate morsels. You could think of at least 2 people whose heads you would have liked to slam into their jaws. This makes you feel better. You have done nothing wrong. Did it matter if you had done nothing right?
Our next reader is Paul Callan. Some of you will remember him from readings at Seksan when he came to read from his first novel, The Dulang Washers. Paul was born in Dublin, an island, but divides his time, or did before the pandemic anyway, between his homes in Kuala Lumpur and London. And his wife is Malaysian, so he has a very strong Malaysian connection. I will be reading his piece for him because Paul has been battling cancer and months of chemotherapy have taken their toll on his voice. But I'm really thrilled to know that during this time of lockdown, he completed his latest novel. And that's very productive use of time, don't you think? The genre of The Secrets of the Sakura Girls is historical fiction. The story is set in a Japanese brothel in Singapore in 1870. At the time, thousands of Chinese men journeyed to Singapore in search of a better future. The Chinese government would not permit females to emigrate, so there was a tremendous shortage of women, filled by trafficking young girls into Singapore to work in the brothels. The girls came predominantly from China and Japan. Paul says, "When I began writing the story, I had the Me Too movement very much in mind. And to give you a flavor of how I approached the story, I would like to read you the epigraph of the book. What emerges instead is a picture of hardship, outrage, injustice, and a stubborn persistence of courage and hope against all the odds. That makes prostitutes three-dimensional human beings." In the piece I'm about to read, you will meet Aoki. She is the heroine of the story. She is preparing to collect her friend Setsu from the hospital. Setsu has been recovering from gonorrhea. Also in the piece, mention is made of Henry and Rupert. Henry is the Reverend Henry Gilmore and Rupert is his 9-year-old son. Henry is the hero of the story. They have recently arrived in Singapore. There is a reference to the police in the piece, and they are investigating the murder of a Chinese leader who had recently become one of Aoki's clients. Finally, in the piece is 9-year-old Kikuyo. Her mother, a prostitute, died years before, and Kikuyo is being groomed to become a future prostitute. Enjoy. Aoki felt happy. Later that morning, she would fetch Setsu home after 6 days of hospitalization. In the meantime, she had to help clean the house. She wandered into the parlor to a burst of laughter and found Suru detailing an incident that happened the previous night. When Kaneko spotted Aoki, she asked Suru to start the story again for Aoki's benefit. Hot tears of laughter were streaming down Suru's face, and it took her several moments to compose herself. Last night, Wa turned up. Everybody knew Wa. He was a frequent client of Suru's, and all the girls enjoyed mocking her for it, suggesting that the two were in love. He claimed to be 26 and a fisherman in China. At the mere mention of him, Aoki found herself beaming from the infectious chuckles of the others. He was his usual quiet self when I took him into my cubicle, but while we were getting undressed, he kicked off one of his sandals so hard that it hit the ceiling and crashed right back into his face. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. She paused for breath. Then, when he was taking off the other one, he toppled and fell to the floor. I know I shouldn't have, but I laughed even more. Worse still, when I bent down to help him, he dragged me on top of him, and a corner of my kimono hit him in the eye. Luckily, he soon saw the funny side of it all and began laughing too. Anyway, we had finished getting undressed when he decided to jump on top of me. But as soon as he landed on me, the bed wobbled and collapsed and he fell off. He kept apologizing, but the more he did that, the more I laughed. He looked so foolish, lying naked in a heap on the floor, staring up at me. Fresh laughter shook Tsuru as she continued telling the story. Then he told me that he loved me and wanted to marry me. Well, can you imagine? I couldn't stop laughing. What happened then? He said he wanted to go, but he wouldn't let me help him put his sandals on, and he fell over again. banging his head on the wall and nearly knocking himself unconscious. The poor man must have heard my laughter following him all down the stairs, and now I feel so bad, she said, chortling. Aoki noticed Haru laughing and was pleased that she seemed to be feeling freer among the other girls. Sunlight streamed into the room as the laughter subsided and they began their chores. Aoki took charge. I'll do outside, she said. Haru, do you want to help me? Haru nodded and Aoki added, but first let's have a coffee. Last night I had an easy time. 3 of my clients couldn't control themselves. Matsuoko laughed. They must have been brothers. Lucky you, said Otomo. You're too attractive for them to handle. Those are my favorite clients, said Tsuru. It's all over so quickly, and then they're gone. Aoki sat sipping her coffee, chatting to the other girls while being distracted by thoughts of Harry and Rupert. I hate the lover boy types who want to kiss me while we're in bed, as if I'm enjoying it, Otomo said. I'm the same, Matsuoko said. How do you handle them? I grab them round the neck as if I'm keen to be kissed, but then turn away at the last moment so their faces are buried in the pillow and I can fix my eyes on the ceiling and think about the money. Otomo's remark drew smiles of recognition from the other girls. Some of them seem really hurt when I don't let them kiss me, Tsuru said. I hate it when they stare at me and ask me why not. And then they get angry when I refuse to kiss them. I get angry at them in turn, Otomo continued. Remember how Omasa used to feel insulted? She used to scream at some of them. I'd never have the nerve to do that, but I still refuse. And I hate it when they try to prise my lips open with their tongue. Ooh, yuck, she shuddered. But you're still counting your money in your head, right? Matsuoko said. Maybe, or I count kernels of corn on a cob. Aoki caught Haru looking at her, her eyes huge, and nodded knowingly at her. I always tell them it's not allowed, Tsuru said. When they ask why, Matsuoko said, I tell them Mother Usa does not permit it. The persistent ones then promise not to say anything and only give up when they think I'm getting bored, which I am. Then Kaneko spoke. The men I dislike the most are the ones who keep checking their clothes to make sure their money is still there, as if I'm some sort of thief. Me too, said Tsuru. You can tell them by the way they fold their clothes carefully on the chair so that none of their money spills out. A couple of times money's fallen from the clients' pockets and they've been amazed when I've helped them to find all their change, Matsuoko said. I once told a client to make sure his money didn't drop on the floor, and he stared at me as if I'd threatened him before getting dressed and leaving straight away. I later learned from Madame Usa that he had complained that we tried to pinch his money. She told him that we girls were all responsible for guarding his money, but he still wanted his money back. Madame Usa asked him if I'd undressed, and when he said that I had, she refused. I wish they wouldn't stroke my hair, as if it was the most romantic thing in the world they could do, Kaneko said. But the worst men are the ones who undo my bun. I hate that too, Otomo said, especially when they tangle my hair. What do you do when that happens? Kaneko asked. I always have my own back. I take forever returning my hair to the way it was, and they soon lose interest. And then everything is over really quickly, and they can't wait to leave. And what about the awful drunks? Matsuoko said. I cringe whenever I smell alcohol on them, Tsuru said. The way they slobber all over me, it makes me want to vomit. A few times I've actually pretended to retch. They soon sobered up then, she mocked. A client of mine once threw up all over me, Matsuoko said. Aoki recoiled and slapped her hands to her knees. Haru, shall we start cleaning? Whenever Aoki entered the room that housed the cleaning materials, the memory of Omasa came to her. Until she fell ill, Omasa had helped Aoki clean the outside drains. Every morning, without fail, the house was cleaned inside and out. The floors were scrubbed and all the furniture was dusted, while outside the open drains at the rear of the property, as well as the frontage, were washed. Madame Usa was terrified of the risk of cholera and dengue fever, both of which could put her out of business. Aoki and Haru each collected a broom, a mop, and a heavy wooden pail, which they filled with water and disinfectant. The drains were large, open ditches that were constructed of brick and tile. The girls brushed loose surface dirt into them and then poured the sanitized water over the sides before mopping the brick and tiles. Once they'd done that, they swept the front walkway and gutter and tipped several pails of water and disinfectant over the top. Aoki found herself stealing glances at passing pedestrians, wondering whether she might spot Harry and Rupert, though she hoped it wouldn't happen because she felt too messy to greet anyone. The sky did nothing to relieve the heat as they worked, and both girls were soon soaked in sweat. Aoki took a moment's pause and looked at Haru, who was driving the water across the pavement. Nearly done, Aoki said, wiping her brow with her hand. When Haru caught Aoki watching her, she gave a weak smile. Let's hope none of the clients recognize us in this state, Aoki said. I hope the police don't pass by and start talking to us. Aoki flinched, surprised that such concern was still lingering in Haru's thoughts. They won't, Haru. They're probably all still asleep, she joked. Haru smiled, aware of Aoki's care for her welfare, but the mention of the police, coupled with the conversation the girls had had about their clients, made Aoki reflect on the murder victim, and she realized that she had no remorse for him whatsoever. Anyway, she said, I'm sure they'll soon move on to something more urgent. Haru grimaced, but Aoki knew her friend was not satisfied and decided to change the subject. Setsu will be excited about coming home today. Home? Haru scoffed. Did you know each other before you arrived in Singapore? No, our villages were close, but we didn't meet until we were on our way here, Aoki said. What is the hospital like? Quiet. All the girls are friendly, but Setsu can't wait to come back. Haru raised her brow and suddenly stood up straight. Aoki, the police. Aoki made to turn. Don't turn around, Haru snapped. They're on the other side of the street. Coming this way? I don't know. Let's go inside, Haru said, bending low and gathering up her equipment. Aoki picked up her cleaning utensils and followed Haru inside. As they traipsed along the hall, Aoki said, They're visiting all the other brothels, Haru. They won't bother us again. They hurried upstairs to the sanctuary of their own private quarters. Come on, Haru, let's bathe. They took turns to wash themselves. You have such beautiful skin, Aoki. It's one of the reasons that so many clients ask for you, Haru said. Thank you. Next we have Shivani Siva. Shivani teaches creative writing at the University of Nottingham, Malaysia. Her first book, Wildlife on Coal Island, was published by UPM Press in 2011 and republished by HarperCollins India in 2012. Her short stories and poems have been published in numerous international journals, including Cha, an Asian literary magazine, Agenda, Construction, Literary Magazine, and many others. Her first novel, Yalpanam, will be published by Penguin Southeast Asia in September 2021. She will be reading from Yalpanam today. The novel, in essence, is an excavation and exploration of the past on many levels: personal, familial, colonial, and cultural. At its root, the novel asks the question, what does it mean to be unburdened by the past? Thank you, Shivani.
Hello, I'm Shivani Siva, and today I'm going to read from my novel Yalpanam, which will be out next month, published by Penguin Southeast Asia. I've been writing and publishing for up to 20 years. I write poems, short stories, and I'm currently working on a collection of creative nonfiction essays. Yalpanam is my first published novel, although I've written several unpublishable novels. They were sort of trial runs. All you need to know about Yalpanam for now is that it's set on a fictional Malaysian island called Coal Island, and it features a woman called Pushpanaigi who is 185 years old. And near the start of the novel, she embarks on a time-traveling journey of sorts to 19th century and 1940s Malaya. The bulk of the novel takes place in Yalpanam, which is the name of the old lady's house. And it's also the Tamil name of her homeland, Jaffna, in Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, which she left at some point in the 19th century to settle in Malaya. The novel, at its heart, is a movement towards liberating the past that in turn facilitates the welcoming of a more wholesome future. I'm going to read from the opening of the novel. I hope you enjoy it. Yalpanam, an old colonial affair, sits on the hill and sighs quietly within its walls. Apart, a vague member of a neighborhood named after angels, rumored to have fled following years of neglect. The long, slow sighs rise and fall like waves soaring and gently passing away on the shore. Day after day, peaking at night, the house sighs to its oceanic beat. For the house, and for the last remaining person in it, the actual sea, a part of the Straits of Malacca, is mere memory. Before the burgeoning of concrete middle-class bungalows, the pale blue sea, turquoise in the maddening noon sun, could be seen from the garden of the house. Not that the old lady, ancient by contemporary standards, biblical, ever really looked up from her soil-caked hoe or plastic watering cans. The sea was always there, somewhere in the distance, water, waves, salt, over there. The sea coolly crashed on the crab-studded beach, unseen, unheard by her, permanently blocked by mustard yellow, lime green, turmeric orange, whitewashed square blocks, plaster of Paris Roman pillars. And further down below, closest to the sea, the brand new rectangular body of the island's first mall. But the old lady wasn't looking anyway. Her eyes had adapted to regarding the minuscule. Earthworms and grit, pebbles and seeds, ants journeying through soil, lizard shit stuck between the rotting planks of her veranda. Heard on one of those deadly still, full black nights, when there's little indication that the island is an island hemmed in by the sea and its repertoire of breeze and wave break. The sighs of the house sound like they originate from an ancient, ailing ghost. Low, long drawn out as if from an unnameable core of an old, old heart, and for the tragic-minded, eternal, carrying a flow of ineffable, weighted breath, cool breath, welcomed by the furred and the feathered on hot, syrupy nights. It floats through the thick green windows of the house and into the little bodies of sunbirds that flit from pillar to pillar on the wooden veranda. Over time, a dim violet sheen has formed around the house, an auric light, visible to animals, to the depressed, to the innocent, to the gifted. A ghostly sphere, it lures the birds again and again, who are compelled by the light to be in the light, a light decades old but still new for the birds. Time works differently for them. During the day, they see the orb's color deepening, hints of gold within flecks of purple, blue. At night, the violet gleam morphs into an inky midnight blue, and when the moon glows bright enough to shed its silver beams on the vegetable garden that pulsates and flickers before the veranda, the globe of dark light leaks into the house through gaps beneath doors and holes formed over long years of decay, of the gnawing of insects, of the comings and goings of people whose footsteps no longer give the house its voice. Deep in the night, when its sole inhabitant is asleep, the walls sigh their loudest, the floors creak, and a soft breeze of sighs blows in loose circles through the front hall, down corridors, in the empty rooms. There are yet shadows in this house, and earth on which the house stands, that pine for rest. Between the shadows and the earth, the sighs heave, collapse into emptiness, and rise, perpetual, patient, as constant as the lamentations of the restless dead. When the house was first built, 138 years ago, nobody on the island thought much of it. It was just another establishment erected by a British planter among other establishments erected by British men who sought some semblance of home, hopelessly, they soon learned, in a land that is a cornucopia of promiscuity. Scorpions basking in the late afternoon light on the spine of Boswell's Life of Johnson, as one early inhabitant of the house discovered on his return from a jungle clearing expedition. Indian coolies muttering Tamil Chinese curses beneath their breath, the adopted half of those hybrid pejoratives picked up from opium dens and fish markets, a poignant outrage against their shared British masters. Iguanas resting with wild dogs, perfectly at peace in the shade of rain trees. The man who built this house, under the circumstances in which the British found themselves, understandably longed for the dark silence of cathedrals, found also in his parish church back home. Divine darkness, so deeply quiet at dawn that the quiet turned into sound. Divine darkness, he used to say, spiced with the fragrance of wax and flame. He yearned for stained glass windows that, as a boy, had enthralled him with their sweeps of color and pictures of saints and angels and Jesus glowing against the dull winter light. Later, when talking to his lover about churches and windows, he explained, "It is like being inside the soft glow of colored light and knowing that the light has come from your own heart. That, my dear, is what love is. At its root, that is love." The house looked like any other colonial house. The most palpable difference, discounting its globe of light, its size, the whispering voices that sometimes sweep past the gable, is that unlike other colonial houses, the house is still here, luckily, magically, exempt from the local council's bulldozing agenda, in line with its motto, "What's past is past, the future is here, modernize." Tucked away on a slight hill, a small jungle behind it, sighing privately in its spectral sphere, the house stands apart from the rest of Coal Island. Thank you.
Next, we have Raja Ahmad Aminola, who was born in Ipoh in 1955 and initially educated at the Malay College, Kuala Kangsar. He continued his studies in mass communication at UITM and later in London, where he studied law. In 1996, he founded the Perak Arts Foundation, Yayasan Kesenian Perak, with other Malaysian writers and art activists. He continues as the foundation's chairman. He's a respected arts connoisseur and an avid cultural promoter. He has served as publisher or editor for several literary and art critical books. As a poet, he's probably best known for his book Soulship, Menyarong Jiwa, which was first published in 2004, and a new edition of it came out in 2011. Please welcome Raja Ahmad reading two of his poems. Thank you.
Hi everyone. I'll be reading a poem called Raya, which I wrote a year ago on the first day of the Eid al-Fitr festivities following a month-long fasting during Ramadan. Here goes. Raya number 1. Whether it's a pestilential nuisance or a gift, it needs to be said. The enforced MCOs, the social and physical distancing, has truly enabled us to reflect and attempt technical corrections to the way we conduct our relationships. A month of fasting prior to Raya should prick our conscience. Our daytime hunger should enable us to empathize with those on the margins, the poor, the sick and hungry, the destitute, the downtrodden, the homeless, and those on the periphery. The newly impoverished urban dwellers. The month that has just departed should give us cause for reflection on the deficiencies of our concerns, the lack of our empathies. whilst rejoicing on this day, let us remember that fasting blinds the body in order to open the eyes of our soul. Let us remember the 3 habits enunciated by Ghazali, which destroys us: greed, envy, pride. Let us not dwell on the sanctimonious, the holier-than-thous, the arrogance of the half-baked, but ponder ever so intensely on what Rumi said: the regret of a sinner is better than the arrogance of the pious. Celebrate and feast by all means, but never forget the lessons of Ramadan imprinted on our soul. Our deficiencies should move us to better things, or else these enforced confinements amidst movement control orders and SOPs would be bereft of meaning for the nourishment of our soul, the growth of our being. Thank you. If you notice, there were a couple of lines that I quoted from the great Persian poet Rumi. This poem was written on the first day of Shawwal, 1441 Hijrah, in accord with the 24th of May, 2020. Thank you for allowing me to share this with you guys. Salam semua. Saya akan bacakan sebuah sajak saya bertajuk Merdeka 2. Sajak ini ditulis awal Ogos 2021. Merdeka nombor 2. Mereka tidak berminat. Ya, mereka tidak berminat. Malah mereka tidak peduli. Mereka tidak pun peduli. Jelas kelihatan rakyat umumnya lebih memikirkan kelangsungan kehidupan mereka di tengah serangan pandemik ini. Nyatanya, rakyat telah merdeka. Mereka telah membebaskan diri mereka. Tidak ingin terpasung, tidak ingin terpenjara dengan permainan elit-elit kayangan itu. Yang betul-betul obses, yang benar-benar taksub. Demikian elit-elit siasah itu dan para pendokongnya bersama media milik mereka yang dikuasai pemilikan sahamnya, bersama para komentator, pengulas dan akademisi yang belum tentu mengenali denyut nadi masyarakat akar umbinya. Berebut-rebutlah mereka, bergentayanganlah mereka dengan zikir ketua, 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 dengan zikir PM, 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 PM. Bukannya bicara bagaimana membantu rakyatnya. Bukan bicara apakah strategi yang bakal dilaksanakannya di tengah-tengah rakyat mengalami derita akibat COVID-19 ini. Mereka tidak pun bicara bagaimana mententeramkan masyarakatnya kerana kereta api mereka bergerak laju atas rel demi rel ke arah destinasi peribadi mereka. Syukurlah rakyat kini tak mempedulikan semua itu. Letih, jemu, muak dan mual adalah perasaan mereka. Malah yang peduli pun cukup marah pada helah dan ulah para politikus itu, yang kini mereka lebih mengerti bahawa elit-elit siasah itu memperjuangkan kepentingan mereka sendiri dengan menggunakan nama, melaung-laungkan slogan demi rakyat, demi rakyat, demi masyarakat, demi kaum, demi bangsa, demi agama, demi negara. Kini rakyat lebih tahu kerana telah terang lagi bersuluh berkat andang dan obor pandemi betapa Machiavelliannya mereka itu. Syukur kini ramai orang-orang bebas dari tertawan, bebas dari terpasung, merdeka dan merdeka, terus merdeka dari elit-elit kayangan itu. Sekian, terima kasih. Ini kebetulan saya tulis pada 17 hari bulan Ogos 2021, beberapa hari yang lalu. Untuk referensi, kayangan merujuk kepada suatu istilah yang akhir-akhir ini digunakan sebagai ganti kepada perkataan golongan elit ataupun golongan yang dilihat sebagai tidak terkawal oleh peraturan-peraturan dan yang seumpamanya. Terima kasih.
Thank you very much for joining us today and for listening to these writers. I think it's so important that we keep our live event going in some form at least until we can one day manage to get back together and attend a live event. I'm missing that terribly, and I'm missing all of you as well. Never mind. Next month we'll be back. There will be a September edition on the last Saturday of the month at 3:30 in the afternoon. That's the time that the video will go up live online. And next month it will be introduced by Shivani Siva, so you'll meet her again. Till then, thank you so much. And if I have one plea to make, it is go out and buy some books by Malaysian authors and read them and give them some feedback on those books. We've been terribly split up from each other during this pandemic, and I think it's absolutely essential that we give each other lots of support. Thank you.